Okay, we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Colorado Sun chatting, I guess, Zoom events. Appreciate you guys tuning in. My name is Jason Blevins, reporter at the Colorado Sun. We've got Ethan Greene with the Colorado Avalanche Information Center and Jeff Sparhawk, Colorado Search and Rescue Association. We're going to sort of have a rambling, casual chat about backcountry travel, safety, kind of wherever this thing might go. Thanks again for tuning in, and we're just going to start off. Ethan, why don't you kick us off with tell us your gig and what CAIC does for us.
Thanks, Jason. My name's Ethan Greene. I'm the director of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. So the center is a state government agency. We're part of the Department of Natural Resources, and we're tasked with helping people around the state with avalanches and avalanche safety. And so we do that mostly through forecasting and education. We put out avalanche forecasts for backcountry areas for the whole state of Colorado. And then we also work closely with the Department of Transportation on avalanche safety program for the state and federal highways. That's me. That's my gig.
And Jeff Sparhawk.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So Colorado Search and Rescue Association is a nonprofit organization. Our members are the backcountry search and rescue teams across the state, the sheriffs, and some of the folks that we work with all the time. And, we help out the teams in lots of different ways, from education to providing them resources if a county is too busy or looking for something specific, we'll go dig it up and get it out to them. So we kind of have an operational aspect. We have an educational aspect. And we also work very closely with Ethan and his folks and a number of agencies across the state to get out safety education to the public, to try to make sure that we don't have too many calls. If we can, we'd like to put ourselves out of business.
Yeah. So I've worked with both of you guys over the past several years, many years. But the past few years, we've had especially spicy sort of avalanche seasons and search and rescue calls, really kind of working you guys and your teams as more people sort of went into the backcountry. Colorado's population is growing. More folks want to, get outside and recreate in wilder and wilder places. And that's sort of added to the workload of Colorado Search and Rescue volunteers, as well as Ethan, your crew of forecasters and avalanche investigators, scientists. So let's just talk about the season we just had. Ethan, looks like we lost 10 people in avalanches this year. And, I've been writing about some of those. We've worked together on a few of those. Kind of curious. There's one thing that when we were talking for a story that I did a couple months ago, you guys had said it's pretty hard to find new reasons and new sort of sources of avalanches, new mistakes that are being made in the backcountry. So it's becoming more easy for you guys to identify trends in decision making and other trends. What'd you see this year when you kind of take that 20,000 foot perspective on the horrible loss of life that we've had, and kind of what you see as maybe a trend, and what can we do better to maybe not have that number so high?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Jason, and there's a lot that's potentially packed in there. It's looking at these accidents, it's a hard thing to do, and it's an interesting thing to do sort of at the same time. And I think what you're referring to is a discussion that you had with me and Spencer Logan,
right,
who works at the center as well, and is also the author of a couple of the volumes of the Snowy Torrents, which are compendiums of avalanche accidents over kind of 10-year periods that go back, I think, into the early 1900s. But especially like the last couple of volumes what he has done is really identify common threads and then kind of label the different accidents so that you could kind of look at a particular type of avalanche, or say like not having rescue gear, or traveling multiple people on the slope at the same time. Some of those common threads, and kind of look at accidents from that framework. So I think what we see is both that there are these common threads that unfortunately we see over and over again in these fatal accidents. But then there's always details with every one of these accidents that are, I don't know necessarily unique, but they're different. So there's sort of this commonality and this individuality wrapped up together in these. And so, when we look at like kind of the broad overview, kind of like what you were asking, what can we do better? Unfortunately, a lot of it is really pretty basic avalanche safety stuff that you would learn in, the first or the kind of your first avalanche class, whether it's an awareness class or, a multi-day kind of level 1 course where you're out in the field. Like, you would learn the things that you would learn to do things that if you don't commonly lead to accidents. And I think there's kind of good news and bad news in there. The good news is that these accidents by and large are preventable. The bad news is that we're teaching people how to do this, and we're giving them information about that they can use in the backcountry. And, many, many people are doing that successfully. They're implementing those strategies successfully, and they're going out, using the public lands, having a good time, coming back safely. But occasionally somebody, makes a mistake and it costs them their life. And so how to reconcile that is really tricky. And that's a lot of what we do, is both, try to give people more information, more strategies, reinforce some of these strategies, hopefully celebrate with them the success of implementing that. And then also look at these accidents, whether they're fatal or more near misses, and try to understand what we can do better and what we can tell people that they can try to avoid those situations.
Yeah, it's truly one of the more fascinating aspects of your work and your reports is, walking that very fine line to give us things that we can learn, so that I can think about. I do that all the time when I'm traveling in the backcountry. I think about what I've read in your reports and your team's reports and Spencer's reports and Brian's reports. I think about that stuff, and it's always sort of bouncing around in my head. And I guess that's kind of the idea of those reports, is that you want to put something in our heads so that we can recognize a particular hazard, a particular behavior, or what do they call them? Heuristic traps, that kind of get us into a certain mindset that can maybe lead to a mistake where the margin of error is not good.
Jason, I might add, the application of the teaching of the science is difficult, mm-hmm. right? There are so many variables out there, and to get to the point where you really feel comfortable applying what you've learned just simply takes time and reps.
And the irony is that the longer you do it, the more you are exposed to hazards that you can't really control. It's like, you get better the longer you do it, but the longer you do it, the numbers are stacking up against you.
They certainly are in terms of exposure. And I think, Jeff's point is a really good one. Like, we can't ignore the complexity. Like, these are hard things to navigate. They're very complicated situations. But we also, there's many, many people that are navigating, say, Avalanche Hazard in Colorado on a daily basis and, doing it well. If we look at, the accident rate, like, it's starting to change with, 2 of the last 3 years having much higher deaths. but throughout the United States and Colorado, starting to change a little bit, but still is on this track of really fairly consistent, not a huge change, not a statistically significant change in the number of people that are getting killed in avalanches every year. But yet the use is going way, way up. I think we all kind of agree that that's happening. And so, there's some good news in there, but also kind of a cautionary tale. Like, in a lot of ways, depending on what your goals are and how you want to try to approach this. And like Jason, you were talking about kind of the overall exposure. Lots of people do navigate this stuff, enjoy the backcountry, winter, summer in Colorado, and come home safely every day. What we can't ignore is that there are real hazards out there, and you really need to be prepared for them. And I think that's really both what my organization and Jeff's organization do is both try to educate people and educate people about the hazards, encourage them to be prepared, hopefully arm them with some information, and then, specifically the search and rescue groups, be there in case something goes wrong.
Sure. I remember I took my first for level 1 in the 90s, and we were like looking at snow with little things and digging giant pits. And then I just refreshed it a few years ago, and we dug one pit real quick, but it was mostly like psychology class or something. Like we're talking about ways to think and, why are you making that decision? Why do you think this will work? And, we had the phones and all the tech and everything. It's changed out there, the way that we educate. And I think, education is the key. And I think, Ethan, you do a great job when you're talking about avalanches. When danger's really high, you're obviously very like, hey, take it easy. But, at the same time, you always say, hey, get out there and enjoy your public lands. Like it's really fun out there, and you can go have a great time and, be safe, just be heads up and be, to arm yourself with as much as you can. And that's something that, I think could sometimes get lost in the avalanche death and scary stories that, there are ways to travel in the Colorado backcountry in winter and limit your exposure and have a great time and skip through low angle meadows and just have a blast. And that's
absolutely. And there's also, there's times to get up onto those steep slopes. I think it's really a matter of timing, picking the right times to do this. Like if you make a list of, if you're a skier, you make a list of, every ski descent in the state you want to do in your lifetime, like you can do that. You just can't randomly pick one and do it tomorrow. You have to make sure that you line up the right day and the right route. And that's really, kind of the tricky part and a lot of what Jeff was talking about in terms of the experience. But some of it really just is patience. And, we've had a couple of incidents, recently where we've talked to, like there was a fellow snowmobiling and his group had talked about all of the hazards and they had read the forecast. They really had it nailed in terms of what they were going to do. And he admitted like he just got excited, and just, wanted to get up on a slope. That is something that they had talked about not doing, but like everything was going so well that day and, it was such a beautiful day and the conditions were so great. And sometimes it really is just kind of that momentary lapse that, that leads to a bad outcome. Fortunately, he had a close call, but nobody got hurt. So, not a very bad outcome, but, those are kind of opportunities for all of us individually to kind of learn about ourselves, and I think, part of, you were talking about, Jason, kind of the change in education, part of it is that sort of group approach, where, you see me starting to shake and shiver and get excited about something and you're like, hey, like we said we were going to go there. And it really is kind of that, that team effort to keep each other safe. And, I like to think a little bit about, avalanche safety in Colorado as especially the backcountry part of it as being this community effort, like the Avalanche Center is here to provide information for people and training. That information it gets a lot better when people tell us what they're seeing out in the field so that we can collect more information. So, never fear, Jason. We do have people out there looking at snow under microscopes every day and digging snow pits. But getting that information back from the public is super helpful. And then, of course, like the information that we put out, like really doesn't do anybody any good unless people are using it and applying it. And so, it trickles down to individuals using that information and then going out into groups and working together to, like you say, try to have a good time, try to enjoy the Colorado backcountry and come back, then tell the Avalanche Center what they see, and it all starts over.
I love it. It takes a village to stay safe in the Colorado backcountry.
Absolutely. But I would highlight one thing that Ethan said. To go out with the right people, get the information from CAIC, and then discuss it before you go out. And really take the time and set your plan. And if you're going to violate your plan, you better have a damn good reason. And so to really do that with the right people, I think is the way that we keep each other safe. And not just get into the conditions and go, yeah, we're going to do this or something else and not have discussed it, not have thought about it, right? Jason, you talked about the heuristic piece of this. It is so important.
So important.
Yeah, and I think that is the biggest change, I think, in avalanche education over the last 20 years is there's a bunch of pieces of this. The heuristics are a big part of it, but that emphasis on trip planning, like get the information, sit down, think about where you're going to go. How does that fit in with the avalanche forecast? Are you moving into places that are highlighted in the forecast? If so, how are you going to manage that? Or should you pick something where you're just going to avoid those areas? And doing that as a group, and like Jeff says, then it's not just making that plan, it's going out and implementing that, and a lot of times reminding each other. We do that just as the CIC staff from that kind of workplace safety perspective, which is different but similar in some ways, where we do these fairly detailed plans that we have to discuss with somebody else in the Avalanche Center before we go out. And then typically we're like referencing that plan. We're like, hey, like we said, we're not going to go on to northeast facing slopes over 35 degrees. And we're about to do that. And typically we don't discuss whether we should or not. We just say, oh, we said we weren't going to do that, so we're not going to do that. But again, that's kind of workplace perspective.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and I think we've seen a couple reports this season where plans kind of changed mid ascent, and that was one of the problems that was identified, and maybe mistakes that were made. But stick with the plan, make a plan, and stick with it, and think hard about any deviation that might come from scanning a beautiful field of open, pristine powder. Hey, Jeff, a couple of years ago, we started talking about some pressures on search and rescue when things do go south in the backcountry, like they do for even people that are planning perfectly. We saw, 50 plus search and rescue teams in Colorado, 2,800 something volunteers, and they were, going out on 3,600 something, calls a year. Has that slowed down a little bit? Is it still that big number? And talk a little bit about some of the stresses and changes for your search and rescue folks who are, kind of out there at the ready when things go wrong for us in the deep woods. Yeah.
Before I do that, I do want to mention that really across Colorado, emergency response is a really big field. And quite frankly, it's an underappreciated and underfunded field, whether it's fire, law enforcement, EMS, search and rescue. There are a ton of people working side by side on all types of calls to make this kind of thing happen. So for instance, currently in Teller County, right? They got some fires going on. And the search and rescue team's down there helping with evacuations of these subdivisions to make sure that people are staying safe. It's not just that we're out there doing one specific thing. And it's often that firefighters or paramedics on ambulances or sheriff's deputies they're right there with us in the thick of things. And so I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that it's a really big field. And I think that the numbers we talked about were kind of the COVID numbers. And we got hit really, really hard during COVID. We had some huge stresses where everybody was going outside, right? That was the message. Stay local and get outside, get out in the woods, which was great. We had big concerns about whether rescuers get COVID or if we have to quarantine an entire team. What are we going to do? How are we going to respond to this? How are we going to provide these services? But thankfully, we made it through that. And now the numbers have dropped to kind of what we were seeing before. So closer to, say, 2,000 calls a year. The teams are still quite busy. We had a relatively mild winter. Obviously, the avalanche deaths, but the other ancillary calls that we often have seem to be lighter this winter. However, just in the past week or so, with the increased temperatures, calls are picking up really quick. So I just heard that Summit County had 5 calls in 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
And so, this is people not necessarily appreciating the change in the snowpack, not appreciating they need snowshoes, not recognizing that it's going to still get cold at night, things like that. And so we expect that while we might have had a slower than average winter, we'll get back to the averages. So it will probably be a busy summer for us.
Sure. Yeah, we're going to see some pretty strong runoff.
Yeah.
So your river teams are going to be busy.
Yeah, water's going to be potentially quite dangerous in lots of different areas. And people really need to be paying attention to that, especially if they cross water in the morning and then want to recross in the afternoon after the rivers have come up. Things might get a little spicy.
So we have a really robust database of whitewater accidents. I don't know if you guys, I know, Ethan, you paddle a good bit. Is there any crossover on kind of the decision-making focus? I just got a note from a reader saying, what is a heuristic? So maybe, Ethan, real quick, run through, the heuristic trends that we've seen that have been identified in the winter side. Does that apply at all to summer, river, hiking? It's got a little bit, right? There's got to be some crossover.
Yeah, so heuristic is really just a fancy word for a rule of thumb. So it's essentially a shortcut for making decisions, and they manifest in all aspects of our lives. They're sort of an important part of how we make decisions. And then, like you said, Jason, there's been some that are some specific ones that that pop up again and again, either in literature or in reviews of avalanche accidents. So like familiarity with terrain is one. Talk about the expert halo, where there's one person in the group that everybody feels like they defer to for making decisions. And in that regard, I think there are some commonalities with like whitewater accidents. One of the tricky things about avalanches compared to whitewater is that a lot of the whitewater hazards you can see, and sometimes you can't see the avalanche hazard. You can see the terrain, but recognizing whether it's really dangerous or not as hazardous can be kind of tricky. That's obviously not 100% true in rivers, but that's one piece of it. But I think, like Jason, you probably have experienced. This is the hometown run. This is something that we do every day, and you still see accidents on that sometimes because people are just so familiar, or they don't recognize that this is an unusual year, and like we're seeing it at 5,000 CFS, whereas typically we're running it at 3,000 CFS, and things can be really different, with those different water volumes. So I think there's certainly some crossover between the two.
Sure. So one thing I was hoping we could chat about real quick is that we got some new funding for both of you guys coming in. Things are checking in with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. The Keep Colorado Wild Pass, $29 on every registered vehicle in Colorado, is providing a big pile of money for parks. And once they hit a certain level, which they're pacing at apparently, going to get some money for Colorado Search and Rescue Teams and Colorado Avalanche Information Center. So wanting to talk a little bit about, let's start with you, Jeff, on what this funding, I know that you were going to use it for some training and support for your volunteers. Maybe riff a little bit on how plans are expanding for how that money might help your crews.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a discussion in progress. The Colorado sheriffs are very much involved in all of search and rescue, but
Sure.
especially in this funding aspect of it. Right, the sheriffs are responsible for the coordination of search and rescue, and play a huge role with their teams, their local teams, in terms of ensuring that they have what they need. And so that and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we've been spending a lot of time collaborating and coming up with the best way to do things. Recognize that money is being collected as of January 1st of this year, but it won't be available for probably another year. And so, we're still in the planning phase and we have some time. But currently, we also have some bridge funding. And through a lot of hard work, what we have been mostly using that for is two main things. One is to ensure that we're proactively training these responders, these volunteer responders, to know how to deal with the psychological stresses, to be resilient to these crazy situations that these folks get themselves into, and to be able to be able to continue in their lives, right? It would be terrible to have one of these volunteers go out trying to assist some member of the public and have it really screw with their head such that their whole life has changed. And so we really want to proactively support them and protect them and give them the tools so that they can maintain a healthy outlook, that they can continue to do what they love to do. And this involves their families and their workplaces and all aspects of their lives. So it's really important. It's never really been done before, at least at the scale we're trying to do it. And it's being utilized by essentially all the teams across the state to try to recognize this. The other thing we're doing is we're really working to help all of these teams improve the equipment they have, improve the training they have, right? Some of the kind of low-hanging fruit stuff that we can buy. However, with the shortages, the supply chain stuff that's still going on, purchasing trucks is still a slow process, or purchasing ATVs and things like that. So we're trying to better outfit these teams so that they're prepared. And quite frankly, so that these volunteers don't have to spend time doing fundraising. We're really good at running up and down mountains and playing in whitewater or avalanche terrain or whatever it might be. We're not so good at asking for money. That's not why people volunteer to do rescue.
It's I think it's always important, and I always, whenever I write about search and rescue, I try to always make sure and say these are volunteers. These are people with full-time jobs and just working away, grinding it out in hard mountain towns where it's difficult to, make a life and make a living, and they're taking time away from their families and their work to go, rescue us. And sometimes they see horrible stuff. I think search and rescue folks are stoked to have you advocating for them, Jeff, in the State House and getting that kind of care lined up for them as they deal with that stuff. Like it's got to have some weight at some point if you respond to enough of these things. And you're a volunteer who likes the outdoors and likes to go rock climbing, and you're exposed to some of the more horrifying outcomes of what you love to do. It can be, I don't know, you probably deal with that too, Ethan. Is it hard for you fellas to go out and have a good time in the woods sometimes after what you've seen and read and researched and report? And I don't know.
I used to be one of the rangers here in the city of Boulder, right? So the Flatirons were my responsibility, and I used to climb all day, every day, and I for a number of years I just simply stopped climbing, other than on rescues, and it was work, and there was no getting away from it. It is difficult. And everybody's going to be different in terms of how they approach it and what they do. But also recognize that, by and large, these volunteers are paying their own way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so they're paying out of pocket. They're giving hundreds of thousands of hours every year to be able to provide these services. So there's stresses in all different areas, whether it's, family finances or maintaining a job, or if you live in a mountain town, maintaining 5 jobs just so you can live there. And being able to do all this is really tough on folks.
I know, as you guys both probably know, my father, the amazing Mike Blevins, is with the Greene County Search and Rescue, works for them. And, there's a lot of old timers that are on search and rescue teams because all the young folks are grinding it out. Like you said, 5 jobs, it's hard to cut away, and do that kind of stuff. And so you tend to find, folks who maybe have a little extra time on their hands volunteering, and that could be one of the challenges for keeping those teams vibrant, right, Jeff? Like kind of, getting that young blood in there. That's a challenge that, I think you're seeing across the high country and in all sorts of industries. Just the fact that if you didn't get there a long time ago, you got to grind it out to make it happen.
Yeah, housing is a huge issue in so many or so many aspects of life in Colorado right now. And I do think that, somebody who has the luxury of time likely is retired or near retirement. And those people are great. They have
Sure.
a life worth of experience that if they're willing to provide it, we're going to tap into. However, for how many years do they have strong backs and strong knees, and can they run up and down hills? We've been talking about how many more people are we going to see that have 30 or 40 or 50-year careers in search and rescue, where, there's not that many young folks who are available now. And even if they are, in today's society, people seem to jump jobs pretty quick and move around quite a bit. And so they're not just sticking in an area and learning the geography, learning the trails, learning all of the nuances that make them really great at search and rescue. They move somewhere else, and maybe they can join another team, but that's going through the process again. And that's difficult for folks.
Yeah, sure. Ethan, how many folks do you have at CAIC?
There's 25 of us now.
Okay. You guys this year unrolled a new forecasting model, right? Kind of moving to some afternoon reports, expanded your zones. I remember back in the day when you had 3 zones and then you went to 10, probably 15, 20 years ago or so. How did that, tell us a little bit about that new forecasting model, how it worked for you guys this year, and then how maybe the increase in funding will, because you guys also got that bridge funding, right? Did I read that?
Yeah, that's right. So that's some of that bridge funding, made the new website, which allows for that dynamic zone model to work. So we that's some of what we've been using, the funding that we've been getting, and sort of looking towards the future and building kind of this flexible model that will allow us to produce more detailed forecasts as we get more information, whether it's increasing modeling or data collection or remote sensing. So it really allows us to kind of grow as the information grows in some ways. And yeah, I mean, essentially, like you're talking about, the center actually back in the 70s started out with just products for the whole state, and then moved to the kind of northern, central, southern mountains paradigm until probably 2006 or something like that, and then moved to those 10 zones, which we've been using for many years. And essentially, those zones were great. They worked really well in some ways, but anytime you have like these fixed boundaries for this evolving phenomenon you're trying to describe,
right,
you kind of butt up against the wall. And so we would constantly be looking at one zone and saying, okay, it's generally these conditions, but it's a little bit worse in the north, or and a little bit better in the south, or a little bit worse in the east, and a little bit better in the west. And so, do we pick which value do we pick? And then to describe the other places. And so our goal was really just to be able to, break up the mountainous terrain based on the information that we had, and really just give people better products. Just tell them, instead of saying this zone is considerable, but it's probably moderate up north, just splitting out the north side and saying it's moderate up there and considerable everywhere else. And so far, I think it's worked pretty well. It's definitely been a learning curve for us as forecasters, and for the public to use it. But I think for the most part, it's worked well on both sides. I will probably continue to see that evolve. Probably into the spring, we'll start to see some bigger areas. As the amount of information reduces and the conditions get kind of more uniform, and then we'll see how it goes as we get into next year. I think we're learning how to use it better, and so hopefully continuing to kind of improve the scale and quality of our products. The other change that you mentioned is we moved to doing this in the issuing products in the afternoon.
I like that.
And that really goes into that avalanche education discussion that we had earlier about trip planning. We felt like we could give people information in the afternoon of the day before, and that would help them plan their trip. So instead of giving you Thursday and Friday's forecast on Thursday morning, now we give it to you on Wednesday afternoon, with the hope that you're going to use Wednesday evening to plan and plan for your Thursday and Friday.
And the new website allows us to kind of identify specific areas. Like, say, if you have your favorite zone, you can kind of get a pretty, condensed forecast or at least look at that particular area with that particular angle and that, what direction the slopes are facing, terrain choice and everything. I found that to be incredibly useful. You hearing a lot of good response on the first year of that forecasting model? I bet you heard from some OGs who didn't like it too.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of comments, overwhelmingly positive. Certainly some questions from people about how things were working, which was really helpful for us to try to understand like how people were looking at it and how we could describe things better. And of course, there's always people that struggle with change, and that happened both inside our group and in the public. I think it's been successful, and one of the nice things about it is it sort of broke apart like the regions that the forecasters were looking at to issue products from how people were ingesting those products. And so that gives us just a lot more flexibility to kind of grow as our hopefully funding increases with the Keep Colorado Wild funds that you're talking about, and our capabilities change. It just it makes it easier for us to improve the products without causing as much disruption to the public. Because we're really just trying to get people to, put a point on the map, just like you would in Google Maps. You click on something or type in a place name, and we'll show you the spatial context that forecast is good for, and the best information that we have.
Yeah. I've heard lots of people really like it, and I enjoy it. I'm so appreciative of the ability to sort of focus in on certain areas and certain terrain features that it helps, rather than, oh, I'm in this, entire 100-mile wide zone. I don't know. It gives me a little more to work with, right? I like that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad it's working well for you. And yeah, we hope to continue to improve it.
Will you be like hiring more, you think? Like, does it require more manpower to put out those kind of, yeah, imagine it would.
Yeah. I mean, we really changed our whole staffing model to do this. And so that's that was the other reason. So the two main reasons to kind of move to the afternoon forecasts are, one, we felt like it would help people, would provide better service, help people with trip planning. And then two, like, it takes us longer to build that map and figure out, where the boundaries are going to be and what the spatial patterns are. So we are essentially working in kind of 3 shifts. So we have, somebody coming in at 4 a.m., just like always, to check to make sure there weren't any big changes overnight and that, the forecast is kind of on track. If we do need to change something, we will change it really at any time during the day. And so you should definitely be looking at the timestamps on the products when you're reading them. We do send out messages on Twitter whenever we change a product. But assuming everything is going on track, then that person kind of hands off to a senior person who's working throughout the day, and they kind of start building those products and, maybe calling some people, talking to people about where they're going out into the field, try to collect data to answer specific questions we have. And then the whole group gets together about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we get on a video call just like this and talk through what's happening around the state. Look at the data that we have, construct those products, and we try to have them done about 4 o'clock so that we can issue them as one package at 4:30.
Yeah. One of the things that I like about being able to be a supporter of the Friends of CAIC. It's an easy way to be like, hey, I'm supporting your work and I use your work. So it's, it feels like I got a path to do that. Jeff, is there, how can say folks who want to just support search and rescue, do they have to go to their individual team? Do you have that sort of, is that you that's sort of the Friends of CAIC that serves that role as sort of the cheerleader of, all these different diverse, efforts around the state? I've always liked the Friends of CAIC, annual party. That's kind of a fun way to raise some money. But is there, for listeners or viewers who are like, hey, can we, how can I support search and rescue? Wow, I didn't realize they were volunteers. What can I do?
Yeah, every team will accept donations, and
sure.
From our standpoint, we want the most bang for the buck, literally here, and so the either CSAR or the local teams will accept donations and put them to good use, and trying not to have too much administrative burden in between all of this. So to support all of the teams, make a donation to CSAR at coloradosar.org, or reach out to your local team. And everybody has a donation link, I think, on their website at this point. Or if you want, you can go to CSAR and make a donation and direct it to a specific team, and we'll get it to that team.
Sure.
And so
I like that. Seeing a lot of ski resorts that have been giving their uphill revenue, like if you buy a $10 pass or whatever, $25 pass to skin uphill at the resort, that revenue is going to the local search and rescue team. Seeing that Winter Park and Steamboat was kind of hoping to see other resorts maybe follow that path. Maybe they will if they are prodded enough. But that's it's sort of a good lead into. We got a bunch of reader questions on this talk, and a bunch of them asked like ways to get better and kind of prepare yourself for backcountry, intro sort of backcountry stuff. And that's one of the great appeals of skinning at the resorts is kind of get the mechanics down and the skins and the boots and the skis and how they feel going up as well as down. and that's, been an incredible spot. We got the fellows over in backcountry, Bluebird Backcountry, who are kind of offering that intro level light, introduction with some mitigated slopes for skinning and things like that. What are you guys seeing in terms of that sort of step into this more advanced backcountry play, whether it's going on a hike or, overnight backpacking to, like crazy stuff? I remember Mountain Rescue Aspen a few summers ago had that crazy stretch with the, people climbing in the Elks, and they weren't too prepared. And I think they came down to Denver and did these presentations saying like, hey, the Elks are like black diamonds, and don't go, start your 14er hiking gig at, on Capitol or something like that. So yeah, wondering what you guys are seeing in terms of, I don't know, kind of education and that intro level. If you had somebody who was saying, hey, I want to get into, 14er climbing, backpacking, backcountry skiing, where would you send them?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump on that. I'd suggest a couple of different things depending upon where somebody's coming from, right? If somebody's in an area where the Colorado Mountain Club is and they have a group, join and jump in on those groups and the trips that they have and the education that they have. If not, or if that's not your thing, hire a guide. Take avalanche classes. Go slower, and get yourself really confident. I think there's an ability these days. There's so much information on the internet to jump at something that looks cool, that sounds cool, and it might not be. It might be really dangerous. I was talking to the guys down on the kind of the east side of Wolf Creek ski area. And there's some really great snowmobile riders who go down there, and they post stuff. And, you can hire those guys and go ride with them if you can afford it and if you're good enough. But these guys would post stuff, and then the next day there'd be a ton of riders doing the same thing. And some of it's pretty hard stuff that might not be the best choice for some folks. And so to take a slightly different ramp-up path and go a little bit slower, be patient as Ethan's talking about here, and really learn what you don't know, and whether that's climbing or boating or backcountry skiing or snowmobiling or what have you. It really takes some patience to get good, to really build your confidence. It takes some time.
And I've said it before. I think we all, as backcountry recreationalists, have some responsibility to maybe step up and help folks when we see them. That's not something that a lot of us are inclined to do, but I think it's important as we start to see more people wanting to get into the backcountry and enjoying, whether they're camping or, backcountry skinning and climbing mountains. Like, if you've been doing it for a long time, I would hope that you have some sense of responsibility to share some knowledge and help people and not be in a condemnation type of way. Like, we saw a lot of frustration coming out of the, with all the crowds and stuff in the backcountry and camping and growth and during the pandemic. And there's a lot of angst, for OGs and veterans who were disturbed by the growth and people not maybe treating these spots respectfully and not following leave no trace principles and things like that. I don't know. I think that educational component and kind of helping shepherd, newbies into some of these, scary situations is something that should be on all of us, not just guides. Like, we should all just kind of work together. Back to Ethan's point with kind of the community approach, education and safety we can all take a little bit of that. It shouldn't all be Ethan's job.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, Jason. And, I mean, there's always going to be, the odd person that, doesn't have the greatest intentions. But I think the vast majority of the times when all of us see people that aren't treating the mountains and the wilderness the way that we were taught, it is just because they weren't taught that yet. Like they're earlier in their learning curve. They're still trying to figure out, what is the trail etiquette? What is leave no trace? What is being prepared, look like? How does avalanche safety work? What's the best knot to tie in on your harness? Like all that stuff. And so, taking courses is a great way to accomplish some of that stuff. Hiring a guide, if you can afford it, is a great way. From the winter recreation piece, like there are groups out there that are not only teaching avalanche courses, but teaching, some basic skills, like ski touring. There's a bunch of really good kind of snowmobile groups now that are teaching, hard skills. And then, a lot of it is just, building friendships and hopefully, interacting with people. And I think we've all kind of grown up and benefited from, those mentor relationships, those, climbing friends, boating friends, skiing, snowmobiling friends, and that community. And you learn a lot about how to value these resources that we have, how to use them and how to respect them from the community. So I agree with you, Jason. I think it's hard, as somebody who likes to walk around in the woods by myself. I'm not always talking to people on my days off, but I think it's a good challenge for all of us to sort of share the joy and the respect, because it's great in a lot of ways that there's more people using these spaces. It's going to help us preserve them and, hopefully build resources to maintain trails and keep up programs like Jeff and I are trying to run. Like I hope people really do get involved in the Keep Colorado Wild Pass, because that is a great opportunity to build resources for some of our public lands and some of the services that we all rely on. But just handing down that respect and kind of basic etiquette to other people, I think is something that we can all participate in.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, Jason, to take it one step further, I do hope people support the Keep Colorado Wild, but I also hope that they get into their state parks, right? Make use of that pass and go explore, go enjoy. I also think that while we're seeing the population of Colorado grow, we're also seeing tourism grow. And I think that the communities that we had when we grew up and when we were mentored through a lot of this are now much bigger. And I think at the local level, you have the ability, the locals will get out together and do stuff based on wherever you live. But nowadays, there's a lot of folks coming out of Denver, coming from out of state, and getting the mentoring to them, I think, is even more difficult. And that's going to be a challenge that we're going to have to figure out. How do we get that stewardship? How do we get that respect and that joy to those folks who are coming in? And I know CTO, the Colorado Tourism Office, is working on that, but it's a big issue. And how do we approach this in new ways, in innovative ways, to help preserve what we have and keep people safe?
Yeah, and I think there's some good work that's being done in like the off-road vehicle community around that, really teaching respect. I know the friends of the CIC that you mentioned, Jason, like they're working on a mobile classroom that they could take around and, kind of capture people at the trailheads and, give them a chance to interact with some education material. So there are some really, good and I think creative programs that are out there, but capturing the range of people we need to talk to, and especially the out-of-state users like Jeff's talking about, like that's a real challenge.
And you're seeing that almost institutionalized with, sustainable tourism promotion and how the CTO, Colorado Tourism Office, is promoting Leave No Trace. And, they're really, 20 years ago when it was about tourism, you stood up on the mountain and you said, everybody come to Breckenridge. This place is awesome. Everybody come on in, and now it's more focused, refined, nuanced kind of messaging saying, hey, come live like a local and, hike responsibly and leave no trace and, be respectful. And, the messaging has changed significantly. It's really interesting. And I think that's something that you could learn for backcountry safety messaging and avalanche safety messaging, that kind of like, hey, watch and learn what the locals are doing and see if you can't, pick up some tips, maybe, I don't know, hire a guide sort of thing. I don't know. It's an interesting transition to see, this tourism marketing move away from, numbers to some sort of, quality kind of, experience and really weighing the impact to locals and lifestyles and the reason that folks come up to the mountains and move there, and really considering that when it comes to attracting visitors and things like that. And I think you're seeing a lot of that messaging kind of trickling into the backcountry, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that years ago, that, like you were talking about, the tourism was really about coming to Colorado to the ski area, or
right.
Coming to like one of the national parks or something like that. And now we are seeing, so many more people interested in these, wild areas where there aren't necessarily services, but there are great recreational opportunities. And, again, that's really great in a lot of ways, if it gives us resources to help people stay safe and also to preserve those areas. But it does make the communication a lot more difficult, especially for winter backcountry users. There's no tickets to buy, there's no turnstiles to go through. And so those common points where we can reach people, we just don't have those tools. And so we have to rely on other ways of getting their attention.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it's a nuanced discussion with philosophy of what do our mountain communities want, right? And how do they support their residents? How do they maintain jobs? But I also think, Jason, as you're pointing out, on the backcountry side, from a backcountry search and rescue standpoint, it's a question of what services should be expected, right? There are people who we've rescued who ask us, why did it take you so long to get here? Right. And not recognizing, we had to get out of work, drive, hike, whatever it is. And whatever time it took them to get there, well, it's probably going to take us something similar if we can even park at the trailhead, right? We may be parking 2 miles away, just so we can get there to help them out. And so I think that setting reasonable expectations is also a big piece of this.
Yeah. And again, it, goes back to education. And, we've got the information from Ethan. We've got, just an incredible technological pile of resources right now with little gadgets in our pockets that can tell us slope angles and, latest weather patterns and everything. Like it's never been more tools and information sources for us to, reduce risks in the backcountry. The challenge is tuning people into those and helping them make the right decisions and helping them recognize when they're maybe following a dangerous decision path. Again, back to those heuristics. And it's interesting. So we got a couple minutes here, just kind of wrap up and, final thoughts on kind of reaching folks and, getting Jeff, your teams to have a nice lazy summer, and Ethan, your crew to have a zero investigation winter. Never happened before, but it sure would be nice.
It has not happened, and it would be nice. I mean, there's so many things that sort of play into that. It's hard to really talk about them all sure. in a short period of time.
1 minute.
1 minute, exactly. Because, I mean, one of the things that we have to recognize is that regardless of how good our forecasts get and how good we get at getting the information out to people, we're dealing with people taking that information and applying it on their own. And we're never going to be standing right next to them all the time to be that group member to say, is that really the right place to go? And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like that is something that as a society, like that's what we value, is that kind of individualism, that ability to go out and make our own decisions. And, with that, like, people are going to make mistakes. And so it's a really hard thing for us because we really want to make sure that nobody gets hurt. That's absolutely our goal. But we also have to acknowledge that probably some people are still going to get hurt no matter what we do.
That's what it is.
We really, there's risks with everything anybody does. And
sure,
to acknowledge that there's risks in the backcountry, that's part of life. And if you want to experience the joy of being in the Colorado mountains, it comes with risks. And that's okay. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're not going to, as Ethan points out, we're not going to hold your hand. You get to make the decisions for yourself. And if you make a bad decision, hopefully we'll be there in time. But you have to acknowledge that. You have to respect that. And you have to respect the environment that you're going into.
That's truly the appeal of it. That's just
absolutely.
That's what makes it so awesome, is the fact that you got to plan and think it through, and it's just you and your crew, and that's the beauty of the backcountry. So it's recognizing those risks, make a plan, stick with that plan. Don't be, what'd you say? You better have a damn good reason if you're going to go change your whole previous plan. Cool. Well, we're at our time. I didn't want to keep you guys too long. This has been great. Super good talk. Let's do it again next year. And we'll just make this a regular thing and see if we can't, elevate awareness, get folks tuned in to what you guys are doing. You're both great advocates for backcountry travel. Appreciate both of you guys joining us. And again, I'm Jason Blevins. And speaking of being bad at asking for money, you can subscribe to my newsletter, which is out every Thursday. coloradosun.com/outdoors. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, all.
Thanks, Jason.
Yep. Thank you.